Now we're going to replace this door with our own one that we've made out of meshes so that we can animate the hitbox as well. This is going to be a slightly more complicated mesh than some that we've made in Godot so far, so we're going to use a type of node called CSG. CSG stands for Constructed Solid Geometry, but what it really means is that we can do this with all the different meshes. We can create unions between them and get a new shape, and we can create intersections between them to get a new shape, and we can create the difference between two different meshes to sort of hollow things out. And that's what we're going to want to do with our door frame. We're going to want it to intersect with a mesh so that we get a hollow door. So let's delete the door GLB from our door scene and add our new type of node called CSG box. You can see we've got different nodes for all the different CSG shapes, but we're going to have a box for our door. And I know that my Y bot is about 1 meter by 2 meters, so I'm going to make the size of this door maybe slightly bigger than 1 meter. It's 1.2, slightly bigger than 2 meters, 2.1 or so. And then in this Z direction, how thick do we want a door? What's 0.1 look like? That's quite a skinny door. Let's try 0.2. Looks like a nice enough door. Now I'll just drag it up a little bit so that it's sitting nicely on the ground. There we go, that's a nice shape for the door. Now I'm going to add a material to the CSG node. Let's add a wood material. Why not? We haven't used that in a while. We've got a nice wood texture here. I'm going to drag that into the texture field. Got a nice wooden door. I probably just want it to be a bit of a darker color. So we'll go with a nice kind of brown, sort of orange there somewhere, and then drag it down and there to be brown. We get a nice dark brown, kind of a mahogany door. How's that look? That's a reasonable color for our door. Now I'm going to duplicate this CSG box and make my new one a child of that outer CSG box. And this is how the magic is going to work for us. If you just see what happens if I move that sideways a little bit, I can choose between making these two boxes union with each other so I get a new shape, or intersect, and then I get just the middle bit where those two shapes intersect each other, or I can change it to subtraction, which is the one I want for my door, where this new shape is going to eat away at the outer shape. So I'm going to undo where I've moved it there. And we're just going to shrink this one down to be a little bit smaller than the outside of our frame. So this one can be the 1 meter by 2 meter door. And then I'm just going to drag it down so it's sitting on the ground as well. Actually, I'll do that with transforms just so I get a nice perfect position for our door. That's going to be 0.1 minus 0.1 there. And in fact it's minus 0.05. And we get a nice inner door, and I should be able to change this from union to subtraction, and I get a wonderful door frame made out of CSG shapes. The even cooler thing about these CSG shapes is that they've got a tick box here, use collision, which if I turn that on, then this is no longer just a mesh, it's a mesh that's also got a collision box on it already made. And even better than that, it's actually an entire static body. Our player will be able to collide with this shape. It'll treat the whole thing like a static body. I don't have to do this sort of 3-step static body with a mesh and a collision shape inside it. CSG box just takes care of all of that stuff for me. Then to get the inside of my door, I'm going to make a copy of this inside hollowed out shape with Control D. And I'm not going to have this one as a child of the other one. I'm going to have it as its own separate thing so that when I turn it back to union, it's not going to actually make a union with the frame and just turn it back into one big solid box. It's going to have its own separate box, and I'm going to add use collision to that one as well so that I can collide with that door. So that's looking pretty nice, but I'm going to have a slight problem when I try to create an open animation for this door, because when I try to rotate the door, it's going to rotate around the middle. So I can fix this in Godot by just adding this door object to another node 3D and rotating that instead. I'm going to add a node 3D to my door, just a plain empty node 3D, and call it door pivot, and then position that right in the corner of my door, which, if I've got this right, will be 0.5. No, minus 0.5 there. We kind of want it at the front of the door rather than the middle, so I'm going to move it in the Z direction by 0.1. So it's right in the corner of the door. It'll be a nice spot to pivot around. Then I'm going to make this inner door a child of the door pivot. So if I try to rotate the inner door, it's still rotating around the middle, but if I rotate the door pivot, there we go, because the door's a child of it, it will rotate as well. So we're all set up to add our animation. We're going to add another new node of animation player and create my open animation, new animation called open. Then I'm going to take my door pivot and lock in the rotation of 0, 0, 0 at the start of my open animation. Create a reset track for that. Go to the end of the animation and then rotate this door. Get the door pivot, rotate it all the way out here somewhere. 130 degrees, that looks nice. 20 or 30, and then lock that in for my open door. That should be it for this animation. It's 1 second nice. 1 second seems like a good amount of time as well. So now perhaps the only thing I want to do, aside from making sure it starts closed, is go back to the label 3D and just check it's in a nice spot, because we've changed the size of our door here. Drag that label 3D down somewhere that looks nice on the door. There we go. And hide it again. Oh, and of course, because we've changed the position of our animation player in the tree, I'll need to make sure I update that in the script. So instead of door animation player, that's going to be just animation player. Get rid of that old one. And now we've got a nice reference to the animation player that's not going to break. And everything else should just work. Let's try this out in game. There's my door. It says locked. If I grab a key, then it should say E for open. I hit E, and it opens my door, and it's an intersectable door. I can't go through the door frame. I can't go through the actual door. And you'll see that if I tried to run through the door when it was closed, that's all working as well. So that's my nice CSG shapes in action. I've got a nice lockable and unlockable door that I can't walk through until it's open. Now, one small thing I noticed as we were playing that is we probably want this collision shape to be a bit smaller now, because we've shrunk down the size of our door, so we'll have a closer proximity to it. And then, really, you can just make this door a bit fancier if you wanted to. You could add some little cylinder hinges or a doorknob or something. What I think I'll do to it is I'm going to add a lock on the door. I'm going to get this lock asset from the Kenny Platformer kit, drag that into my game, and just put a little lock on the door there. It's about one of the few times that the Kenny asset is too big. I'm going to scale that down to 0.5, and then I'll have a nice locked icon on my door, and I'm going to animate this lock falling off when I play the open animation. I'm going to go to a side view here by clicking on the X on my navigation widget so I can see the door from the side. Then I'm going to click on the animation player, go to the lock and lock in its starting position and its starting rotation. I'm going to play to the end of my animation and then move the lock to where I want it to be at the end. So it'll be down on the floor here somewhere, rotated by 90 degrees. It's flat, it's fallen off my door frame. Then I'll lock in the new position and the new rotation, and we'll see how this plays. It's not too bad. I probably want the lock to fall off a lot quicker, so I'm going to grab these two keys and move them to halfway. Let's zoom in a bit so I can see that I'm getting it exactly at 0.5. 0.5. And then once it's on the floor, I can probably fade it out as well. So I'm going to drag this back to 0.5, line up with those two frames that I've just dragged. And then I'm going to start making this lock transparent by right-clicking on it and giving it editable children so I can get to the mesh. Change the geometry. Well, in fact, I won't change it yet. I'm going to lock in no transparency here at 0.5. See that in my animation tree. And then at the end, I'm going to give it full transparency of 1 and lock that in as well. If I play the full animation, I should see the lock takes half a second to fall to the ground and then half a second to fade out once it's touched the ground. That looks pretty nice to me. Let's see what it looks like in my game. Got a nice lock on the door. It says locked anytime I come close enough. If I pick up a key, it should say E to open, and when I open it, the lock falls off and then fades out. That looks pretty nice to me.